Hey, what's up? This is Jeremy, and welcome to my series on making a drum and bass album on the Mate Tracker in 2 weeks. I've decided to split this video up into 5 more digestible parts. The first video is going to be about the project creation and concepts, and then the samples I used and how I organized them to make them easier to find when I was in the heat of making music. The second is about starting projects, conceptually and technically, and then how I approached arrangement. The third video is all about bass sound design. The fourth is all about all the other sound design and programming builds. And then the final video will be about finishing the project, mixing, mastering, and time management. I hope you'll check out the album with the links in the video description, and I hope you find these videos helpful. Let's get started. Let's talk about starting tracks. There's 2 parts of starting tracks. There's the technical part of starting tracks, and there's the inspirational starting tracks. The inspirational starting tracks starts by finding an evocative starting point, the most evocative starting point that you possibly could. And what I mean by evocative, I think those Playbox samples are a really good example. They have a lot of information in those samples. Not only is there multiple notes happening at once, which gives you a harmonic structure, meaning a structure for your chord progressions and your mood, but there's also a lot of timbral information. There's different types of instruments being played. All of those contribute to a vibe. So there's all of this really dense information in those. A really complex pad is a really great example as well. A really cool loop that you found that you want to slice up. And I don't mean drum loop. I'd never start with drums. Always start with a melodic loop of some kind, or some kind of like atmosphere or something. I don't hit drums until I have really gotten a little bit further through the whole thing, and I'll explain that in a bit. The most evocative thing I can. Sometimes that's the beginning of a track where I want to get an atmosphere down, and then sometimes it's the drop itself. Starting with the drop with drop-based music is probably the best thing you could possibly do, because that's going to prove whether or not the track is even worth getting into. If you can't get a good drop going in a piece of music that's supposed to have a drop, and for those who don't make electronic dance music, the drop is the main part after like a build-up or anything like that. It's the part that people dance to. That in drum and bass is the part that people are going to remember, the thing that people care about. So make sure that your drop comes correct. And starting with a drop is never a bad idea. I can get to a drop like after it's done. That's not a really big problem for me. I can make an intro and a build up and get to the drop. But if the drop's not there, I got nothing to get to and the track's not ready to go. That said, sometimes I will start with a atmospheric beginning, and if the track is supposed to have vocals, what I'll do is I'll get the vocals set up and sequenced, and then I'll start building around that. Drum and bass, actually, in general, is a really vocal genre. You can kind of like mouth a drum and bass drop, like like, I know it's cringe, right? But like, it fucking works. Like, so many of the sounds kind of have a vocal quality to them that you can kind of pantomime it with your mouth or in your head, sort of like mouth sounding it in your head, and then try and create what it is that you're trying to create once you get on the Mate. Any kind of idea that you can crystallize in your head or with your mouth, or something where it can be remembered and come back to as a touchstone, is a great way to start a track. So if you're getting intrusive thoughts about sounds and about the way that a line might work, that's actually a good thing. Try and capture it if you can, on a notes app of some kind, a voice notes app, just something, you can bang the table and go like wow, 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 and then you have something that you can then like write to. So that happened a few times. Walking really, really, really helps because it frees my body from having to think about my body. My body is doing something and my brain can think about music. So that's why going to a big city and walking around was such a big deal for me. That's how I generally start tracks conceptually in my brain. From a technical perspective, I'm going to have to actually explain how the Mate works a little bit. The Mate has a song view here. And in the song view, you need to make what are called chains. So you can see there's 8 tracks. Each one of my 8 tracks is going to start a chain with the number that's associated with it. And this is purely for organizational purposes. The Mate works in a hexadecimal format, so there's not just 10, there's more than 10 for each section. This is just how I start. There will be chains that don't match the track number, especially near the end of the process as I'm just like flying around trying to get it done. But this is the basic organizational concept that I use for my tracks. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 and 2 is generally where I start my tracks. So these are going to be my big evocative like atmospheres and chords. 3 and 4 are going to be supplementary to that, like something that works with these after I've gotten 1 and 2 figured out. 4 is generally where I would put my vocals. So these would support the vocal, and then this would be the vocal. 5 is bass. 6 is top loops and percussion. 7 is main drums, kick, snare, some form of shuffler like a or hi-hat. 8 is effects, risers, falls, stuff like that. I try to stick to this because the mate can get confusing if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. I don't start by making all those. What I actually start by doing is somewhere on this, over here on 8, I go up to FE. This is the top last chain. It's very unlikely that you'll ever access it from the perspective of making music. So what I do is I use this as a blank in the mate. If you don't have a blank pattern in a spot, if you're using just regular play mode, the channel will not. So if I play, you'll notice that like 5 doesn't even go at all unless I put something in it leading up to that. So I use FE as my blank pattern. This is one that I'll put whenever I don't want something to play in that channel, but I still need that channel to proceed. What do I put in FE? Well, in FE, I put 4 FE phrases. Phrases are where we actually put note data, and I use FE as my blank phrase. So when I hit play on here, there's nothing in here. It just like is completely blank. So FE for my chain, FE for my 4 phrases, blank, 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 blank. This just sits there and lets things move along. I also make what I call a kill pattern. There are certain commands in the mate that will continue to go. One of them is like called repeat, and it will take a command like volume. You can say volume, start really low, and then put repeat right afterwards, and it will go up, 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 up without you having to touch anything, but it will never stop. So if you don't do what I'm about to do here, this is one way to do it, then you will hit the next instrument, and that instrument will be this loud because that repetitive volume command never stopped going. So FD, or sometimes FC if I'm feeling weird, and I don't know why I did it this way, is my kill chain. So I make a chain called FD, go in, I put FD, and then just those blank ones. And then I go into FD, and I say FX1. The effects channels here are used to do all kinds of things. You can do sequencer effects like arpeggios, you can do mixer effects like sends, reverb, all kinds of stuff, volume, and you can do stuff to the current instrument. It's basically your automation lanes, but there's all kinds of stuff that you can do in here. What I'm looking for here is off and then kill. What this does is it turns any playing sample or instrument off, and then it kills any effects that were happening in those other lanes. You could also put a kill here if you want. Kill it all. And then the numbers next to it mean do it immediately. 0, 0 is do it immediately. So this is my kill pattern. If I have an instrument that is going to hang over the next phrase and I don't want it to, I stick an FD in there. If I have a buildup that I did and I need to kill a repeating command, I put an FD in there. I use off and I use kill a lot throughout other patterns to make things stop, but I always like having a dedicated kill chain so that I can just stop any kind of overhang from happening. So you'll see those a lot in the bundles if you get the album. So now that I have that done, I'll go over to channel 1 and I'll put a 10 in there, and I'll just go ahead and, it doesn't matter what phrase I start with. I usually start with 1. So I'll just put 4 1s in there, and I'll go over here and I'll make a new instrument. Again, I'll start with instrument 1. This is my phrase. This is where I put notes. So you can see I can put notes in here. And I can delete them. I'm not going to give you a full tutorial on the mate because this video is already showing 41 minutes and I haven't even fucking got into sound design yet, so Jesus Christ. Then I'll go into my instrument. This is where you pick the type of instrument you want to use, and I will pick whatever I want to start with, usually a sampler. I'll go into load. If I need to make a distinctive 4-bar pattern, I always work in 4 bars in these things, then I will go ahead and make new phrases in here. I'm not really picky about how I make phrases in the mate. In terms of the numbers, I just go ahead and do whatever I need to do. In this case, I need to put different notes in here. Then I'm going to go to my tempo. I'm going to switch this up to 172. And I'm going to go to my volume here, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the limiter up a bit. I just want to hit like a little closer to 0 dB so it doesn't sound so quiet. This is before the OTT update that was added recently. I did not use that at all. If you have the OTT update on this, it'll work fine, basically is what I'm saying. Let's talk about arrangement a bit. So when I have one thing, I will go to channel 2 and I will try to add something that complements it. And what I'll do is I'll build up this one chunk here until it feels like it's something real, until it feels like, a real boy, so to speak, like it's full of all the sounds it needs to be the kind of music that I'm trying to make. Sometimes it does not include the drum or the break. So an example of a track that started this way, very obviously, is the track City Lights. You're going to hear this sort of intro here with bits of stuff playing. Those Rhodes samples and stuff is what I started with. Let's pretend that these things here is how I started. I would take this and I would copy it and I would paste it into a new section completely on its own. I call these islands. These are like little bits that won't play into each other. They'll just loop. So what? My dog, no dog, don't bark. Don't bark. Once I did that, what I would do is I would make this a new island and I would iterate on it, meaning I would add something new and try to make it its own section. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and randomly add stuff that I made and give you a sense of what that would be like. So before we had this, pretty, right? That's good. And then I would iterate and write more stuff and fill it in. If I was starting with the drop, what I would do is I would write all that, and then I would make an island of that, and then I would subtract from it and put in more atmospheric stuff. So I would figure out what part of the drop I could use in the buildup. This is going to be different for all different types of music, but you can subtract from things and you can add to things. And knowing what section of the song you've designed inadvertently really helps to decide if you want to add energy to it or subtract energy from it. So these islands would represent the core of the track. And as I was walking around New York and also in my hotel room at night, I didn't really go out at night. I just sat in the hotel room and worked after I had walked myself to exhaustion. I would make sure that the islands I had for each track represented the main ideas I wanted to get down. And those were my pins, the things that like on the map, like, okay, this track has those ideas. I've established the main idea of this track. I can let it go for a little bit, work on something else, and then come back to it. And so it's this sort of leapfrogging process where every single track became a get the main idea down, iterate on it 2 or 3 times just to make sure that it sticks, and then move on to something else. And that way I knew that I had the really hard part, the really hard part of coming up with an idea and making sure that it was good. That was done. And then I could go back and work on it and iterate on it and make intros and outros and stuff like that later. This is how I work on almost all music. I always want to get that heavy, like think of it as a rocket, like you need the most propulsion when you're first taking off. And then after that, you need boosters. I guess the rocket analogy kind of falls apart at that point. But I always find that I want to really get as fast as I can to the point, and then I can back off a little bit and enjoy the process of like iterating, build-ups, breakdowns, stuff like that to make the track shine. And of course, the final like glossy pass where you just kind of like really tighten everything up. So in terms of structure for these tracks, I tried to follow the modern, what I hear as the modern drum and bass structure, which is technically like 16-bar intro, atmospheric intro, a 16-bar build, a 16-bar drop 1A, and then a 16-bar drop 1B, meaning that they share a similarity with each other, but usually like some key differences, like the harmonics of the sounds might pop off a little different. There's all kinds of little things that happen in the drop 1B to make it like flow with the first one, but also have its own identity. Then another breakdown, another build, and then drop 2A, 2B, and an outro. If I needed more to make the track work, then I put more in there. My tracks are a bit longer than most pop drum and bass right now. A lot of like drum and bass that I spin tends to be very short, like 2.5 minutes. They don't give you runways, ins and outs. It's like sometimes they just end right after the drop. I want my tracks to have a bit more like aftercare, so to speak. So I have a lot more outro on my tracks than a lot of those tracks do. So just a TLDR, start with the most important idea, get it down, copy it, make a new island of it that you can work on its own, iterate on that idea, and then do that 3 times. And then you can tell yourself, hey, I can move on to the next track. And if you're trying to make an album, move on to the next track. That's how I think about arrangements. All right, so that wraps up this video. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out the links in the video description for a link to the album, which contains the Mate bundles for you to learn from. I'll also put a link to my Mate bass pack and a link to the playlist for this and my other Mate educational videos if you are interested in that. And I'll see you in the next video.